start off with one. Okay.
All right, we're gonna go live, baby.
Okay, let's go. And I'm going to start with this poem called According to Stellar Locale. This particular poem was launched into outer space by the citizen astronaut Cian Proctor.
What do you mean it was launched into space?
Well, she took someone announced to me that she was taking some examples, some smaller poems into outer space launch. I don't know the other people, but she did. I was told that she was taking this particular poem out of this collection to
go to space with it.
To go to outer space. So I guess this is one of the few poems that has been launched in outer space. I'm not saying that as nothing else, not an ego, but a reality that's come into play. So I thought I'd start with this one, just to talk about the great Hubble and the post-Hubble.
That is wild.
Yeah. So we'll go
Will,
with that.
you know, it's not in your bio, but maybe I should put it in there.
You can do that.
Will Alexander, published poet and intergalactic artist.
Well, let me start from this point to gather some momentum, and I'll read. It's not a long poem. It's called According to Stellar Scale. It's for Cian Proctor. Stellar scale, risen above wizened technical complexity, synonymous with a carriage of moons being vapor that rises and electrifies the cells according to true interior functioning, according to voltage that submerged itself while soaring, according to balance as magnetic heightening, not as extension, harassed beyond a wall of waters, but magnetism as ignited significance that partakes of parsecs, that inspires revelation, being ignited first health, where being conjoins with itself as aboriginal revelation. Okay. And we'll start off from there. We'll go to the next poem just to gather some momentum.
Come on, Will, you don't want me to introduce you?
Oh, go ahead.
You're like, I don't need an introduction.
No, please do. Please do.
Well, you know what? You can just allow yourself to get some hype around you, and then you can dive right back on in there.
You can do that. I don't want to just jump the ship and break the program, but go ahead, and I'll be able to mesh in with the reading as things go.
Well, you can heckle me while I introduce you. How about that?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
All right, everyone who is here, good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Kay from Greenlight, and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Will Alexander presenting his new book, Divine Blue Light, which you just heard him read from. And if you joined in just a minute after, Will was telling us how this poem was sent into outer space. So now you all have heard a poem that has traversed many planes. Before we start, I want to say a huge thanks to Will and the team at City Lights for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Before I hand things over to Will, get rid of me. A couple of quick housekeeping things of how Zoom's going to work tonight. In the webinar, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple of different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and with interacting with each other. If you have specific questions you'd like to ask of Will, please post questions in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. I'll be pulling questions from the Q&A to ask of Will later in the program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Divine Blue Light, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. As thanks for attending tonight's virtual event, we are offering 10% off the featured book. I'll drop the buy link in the chat with the coupon code. The coupon code is Greenlight Events 10. Put that in the coupon discount section at checkout online for 10% off. Our featured author tonight is none other than Will Alexander. Will is a poet, novelist, playwright, philosopher, visual artist, and musician. He has published over 24 books in a variety of genres and has earned many honors and awards, to the point that I had to say many honors and awards because I couldn't keep my breath listing all the awards he has won. He has also exhibited his artwork in group and solo shows. He is currently the poet in residence at Beyond Baroque in Venice, California, and he has lived his entire life in Los Angeles. Will Alexander's new book, Divine Blue Light, is a collection of poems from the intersection between surrealism and afro-futurism. Will's poems constitute an alternative cartography that draws upon omnivorous reading in subjects from biology to astronomy to history to philosophy, amalgamating their diverse vocabularies into an impossible instrument only he can play. Divine Blue Light further affirms Alexander's status as one of the most unique and innovative voices in contemporary poetry and among the foremost surrealists writing in English today. So enough from me. It's all you, Will.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm going to continue reading from the volume Divine Blue Light, and it's an amalgamation of my mental trajectory, and I'm going to do another poem that seems to be less condoned to outer space as the first poem was addressing, but the next poem I'm going to do is an odd topic, and it's called Assessing Gertrude Bell. And if you don't know who Gertrude Bell was, she was what I'll call a colonialist cartographer who split up the situation in the Middle East to such an extent that it had a profound non-coordination with the planet, because it created reverberation as the Iraq War went on in the earlier part of the century, caused so many deaths and different configurations. So the colonialist project was to create configurations that only the cartographer could know, and the psychic feelings and the dietary and the psychological state of the indigenous person was not considered. And it's created a lot of havoc in Asia and Africa, other parts of the globe, Latin America. But I'm gonna start this poem at this time, Assessing Gertrude Bell. Should I isolate your brilliance by pausing its causation, as if you were an artifact or a scorched round shell I could never name as seminal tactician or queen mistress of hives? I would render your scale one of cryptic molecules that existed according to causality by debacle. Your war diplomacy led to friction, to pre-cloned attempts at utopia, but always your raw, unaided colonizers' postings, summoned from inherent maneuvering, and your mappings alive with pre-cloud attempts at utopia, alive with the Holocaust to follow. You, as lone wolf, as primeval with guile, as ignited and imperative with fortitude, as map maker, bifurcating desert terrain, a spy insistently indicating names who grace the region with foreshortened compassion, complexification being your orbit as danger with its obligation to decipher. The long-standing secrets, the lingual powers of the tribal wives who clarified deficits, who understood your activity as a glassy incremental flux, being subdivided with Lawrence in the Arab Bureau, casting ripples that ignited future life and death, not as omnipotence, but strategy as colonial conformity. Because you ignited the blazing archaeology of mapping as transmission, future death was summoned. A cheerless residue was defined. Faisal ibn Hussein, a brokered monarch, understood principal aspects of your tremor. Thus, the void you instilled hastened volatility, always subsumed within your demeanor. Here's a smaller work entitled Sand's Phantom is Neurotic Yield. Because phenomena post-exist itself, it is incapable of induction, of deferring its nexus as nouns, cleaving to their post-remains or worlds unto themselves like phantom moons adrift without suns, subsolar in essence, not unlike sonic electrons. Sand's neurotic yield. These poems are not in a classified, within a classified matrix, but it's just like I write continuously, and sometimes the works come out extremely active in terms of length, like my combustion cycle is, everybody may know by now, it travels over 600 pages. At the same time, I'm very conscious and understanding of the one line or two line poem that has poetic essences. It's not about quantity, but about the quality of language, about the quality of the way that things transmit themselves to the internal, transmit to the interior irrigation of the reader or the listener. So we're interested in this not a author's lessoning or an author's bifurcation, but a transmission of energy across the invisible to people in other parts of the universe. And I say other parts of the universe, I mean parts of, say, Madagascar or Nigeria or France or Britain. We're talking about a whole vibrational essence that has nothing to do with a kind of sectioning off of energy, but a collusion of phonemes that conduct a kind of principle that invades the bloodstream, so that the human person is ignited in an imaginal manner, in such a way that he or she begins to rise above earth, above quotidian circumstance. So I don't want to talk too much, but I would like to say a few words about the next poem. Well, I'll just tell you what, I'll just read it. It's called Darkened Solar Implication. Lunar signals on Earth being a sign of splotched deficits that are ashen, prone to protracted psychological cholera. So as seas rise, blindness builds as vertiginous nostrums, as blizzard by analysis, being corpse by rising corpse. Mathematics alive according to protracted weather, yet rise of the seas as monumental assault, never assessed in terms of tonnage of gallons, in terms of inundated harbors, flooded still ports, or any other grasp of the land. This disfigured moon as sign, as splotched aerial configuration, as living nightmare chalice, as if all composed water had lost its tension, perfectly predicted by living indigenous count. I'm thinking of the hand as fractionation, so as to ascend beyond drawn estimate, creating in its wake darkened solar implication. Being invisible refugees in Arnhem land, being alive far beyond counted scale as timber, beyond corresponding human desolation. Okay. And good to see you, Juan.
Hey, Will.
Hey, man, it's good to see you, man.
It's good to see you too.
Oh, man, listen to that great poem you did on the poems with that great band you had, man. That's fantastic.
Those are good days.
Yeah, it was great, man. Great. So, you know, these poems I want to get to is a confluence, not as a formal reading, you know, because I'm just going to read parts of some of these poems. And
right.
one of the poems I'm going to do part ways, so the book can be read later. But this is a longer poem here from the collection. It's called Condone to Disappearance, and it's for Fernando Pessoa.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
so I was able to, I'll say a couple words. I was able to take a walk through Lisbon, and I went to Pessoa's house.
Oh, man. Beautiful.
Stayed some time there to absorb the atmosphere. And what a true poet is, you know, you go through all kinds of what they call ups and downs. That's what the quotidian cliche, but people don't understand what you're really doing because there's so many pretenders. But Pessoa stayed with a lot of aunts and stuff like that, and this and that. Put a lot of scribbled notes on paper, but they're still deciphering right now. But they had a simulation of his trunk with all the papers in it when I was at the house. It's quite interesting. There's all kinds of ways of methods of being a writer, of being a poet.
Yeah.
And the basic thing is just to write. So for me, this is called Condone to Disappearance. I chose the title because Octavio Paz says that Pessoa would kind of disappear in front of your eyes. I don't mean that in a metaphysical way, but he would just kind of you know, people just kind of hone themselves into disappearance. And, you know, Bob Kaufman reminded me of that. I saw him one day in North Beach and he kind of disappeared in front of my eyes. But I'll get to the poem here. I'm just going to read part of it. As sigil camouflaged by curious smoke and surcease, there remains your visage enigmatic and crystal, remaining hidden within occulted lingual ravines. At one level, it is known that your appellation is Fernando Pessoa, born 13 June 1888. Of course, there exists the perfunctory tables of your chronicle, loss of your natural father at 5, your mother's remarriage and new placement in Durban, then university stay fueled by magnetic indifference, then life in rented rooms, then business letters translated from Portuguese to English and French, then criticism written in 1912, creative prose in 1913, and the following year, the heteronyms, their powers, their conspicuous agendas, including Alberto Cairo, Ricardo Reyes, Alvaro de Campos, then one brief romance, to limited publication, then death by cirrhosis of the liver. A capsule, an unleavened symmetry, a migratory transit evinced from my written realm as co-sensation. And why do I emphasize the migratory? Is it because you're always assumed kinetics that reveal ghost emerging and re-emerging from Lisbon? Fernando, being figurative insularity, roaming a perch of invisible significance, retreating to an emblematic edge, only to return as visual briefings, to emit perfection by scent, by confounding observation, lit from within by inner magnificence. Your inner eye, refracted body of diamonds, that formed as an inner cyclonics, as true and concussive blood form. Your poetic forces, gazing via scattered combustion, understanding the rankings of minerals, not unlike an imaginary ostrich on fire with its primeval thesis, understanding precursors, drafts, flowing from various forms with altering. Your personality, human microbial filtration, as anonymous phantasmic shift of various lingual maturation, being high art ascender as itinerant breathing codes that range from susurrant and audible deafening. I'll pause at this point because sometimes, I must say that these poems are difficult sometimes to read. And I'll be honest, I don't practice them, but I just read them and keep moving with them.
Yeah.
Things are always going. You understand this, as a poetry. You don't cherish and worship something that you write. Maybe some people do, but the thing is to keep generating energy. I know you understand this, and we like to continue to generate energy all the time. So, and as I said in New York, I'm not a perfect reader. So I'm trying to create a kind of a balance of energy that is the way where it works. And it's not a perfect kind of situation, but it is a kind of attempted perfection. And it's always interesting in an alchemical sense. It's never a perfect square or a perfect circle, but it is a balance. And we're trying to get that general balance, and I work like the jazz musicians did. Charles Mingus used to just hand out a piece of paper with some little couple notes on it, indications, so to speak. And people like Eric Dolphy would pick up and they could perfectly work with it. He said, that's why you kind of feel your instrument and the way you want to go through it. And we'll take the pulsation from that, as take the pulsation from the sound and the idea, and the sound begins to come out in such a, like I call it an incantatory bell. Here's a small one called peripheral terminology. Not having imbibed ghosts or dust or forces that condone objective termination, I remain as peripheral terminology, not unlike the paradoxical sweltering that erupts from one's grasp, pre-cellular in origin. And this is another one called Fragment, Blaze as Unknowable Drift. Blaze as unknowable drift, as mathematical drift that blazes with ciphers. I've listened to moons eclectically rise, to conundrums, blaze and blaze and descend, not as molecules or distributed torrents, but as vibrational mazes, as curious oneric cartography. And here's another one here called Original Language. As a blizzard of birds, as Hottentots, as density by phonemes. But this is the kind of, I was reading your biography, of course, and I'm similar to you. I'm an only kid in these crazy families. We're supposed to have all these kids coming into one household, but sometimes my whole household was populated by my imagination growing up.
That's right.
Yeah. So you gotta you allow for that, and you allow for life to take over, and you get into certain rhythms and pauses and seemingly dealing with detours and all kinds of disruptions. But eventually you come to an understanding with yourself. So this is why I did this poem, and I'll read part of it too. Divine blue light, sudden and graspable nomadics. It is for John Coltrane, who was, by the way, John was an only boy, as was Dolphy. And,
all right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you keep yourself company by great spirits in your in your ambiance. So I think not as phantom blinding, but the soils of Mount Meru as quantum, as perpetual, as interdimensional kindling. Its hemispheres colliding as bricklage, as osmosis, as sonic notation, alive as sonic commentary phantoms, understood unto themselves as stratospheric particulates, not merely as tense foundational structures, as a pronoun to be levied as simple sonic ramification. You understood this to be in the infinity of your heart, to be microscopic musical grammar, not unlike phosphates, as a syntax of symmetry resounding as an obverse mirroring of chords, analogous to 16th notes, rising and scattering of their own accord, much like the residue from diamonds that bake, not simply shrill supplication as noise, but as spectral realms of themselves. Being sonic blinding bodies that rise and loop and gather themselves on the other side of themselves, not as artifact or translated merger, but as exploration summons, so that the sonic never wizens by pursuing entangled osmosis as complex utopian turquoise. And it was on this plane that you and Dolphy squared private comment into thrilling electrical prophecy that both forged and scrambled light, so that amperage split apart and scattered across soil as interregnum, being blizzards of grammar, not merely emitted from bodies, but sound as hail from unknown wizardry that sired sonic thoughts and streams, understanding such flow as transmuted acre. I'll leave it at that. I'll pause it at that because the poem goes on. And, sometimes poets, you get caught up in your own voice and you tend to, travel on and on and on. But to me, sometimes the whole idea of synecdoche, the part for the whole, creates an irrigating of reverberation in the listener. So that once you go back and read the book and begin to fill in the spaces. I think that's a good way of approaching reality, is the part for the whole. But that means that you have to not only just deal with the part, but to be with the whole of yourself so that you can absorb the part. And that's what poets do, is kind of deal with development of the alchemy of the body, of the being, of the mind, and absorb everything, and so that one doesn't run into a flow of crags of static. So for me, the whole idea of poetry always goes from the small specter into the large tree that grows into a galaxy. So this is the way that I look at things. And as you can see, I'm turning, but not to be scrambled, but to talk about things in flow at the present time. So this is it's called Grammars from Other Suns. The human state is negated microtorrent, never alive as flux, sans dialectical originality, masquerading as some atomic particle as noun. a blinded equation unto itself that can't portend livingness as transmuted range, as incendiary compass field that fuses riddles, that accelerates mystery, that spirals as the field engaging the eighth chakra, as a sub-blended quantum nuance that enlivens its partial power beyond itself as compound stasis, as episodic gesture, its plenum never absorbing grammars from other suns. This is what we have to deal with is the whole cosmos. To me, it's not just a small particle of the political debate, although that's part of our spectrum, especially in the West. You know, it's understanding the blockages of this political torrent that we've been all facing in various Western languages and other languages across the earth, because colonialism has done a big problem for languages in, say, in Africa, where there's a language called Gur, G-U-R, whereas maybe 250,000 people speak it in northeast Nigeria and other parts of the continent. But nobody even thinks about these languages as conveying intelligence. But you know, you can find different phantom Englishes in parts of the United States where people have left it out. Because in the words, it's not just the spoken language, but the language of the being that's being excluded and being corralled into an English or Spanish portion. That is the colonial portion. So to speak with that vibratory, interesting vibration is the most important yield one can do as a poet, is to not just learn things, but to absorb things and to begin to emit things from the best possibility that one has to express oneself. So this is like chancy all the time, because you're not in a position where you're certain of anything all the time. And so, certainly I've been able to get to this point where I can talk to you today and just begin to absorb and work with my own protractions and stumblings. And I'm gonna do this next poem called Montric Blizzard as Space. A continent that has made a covenant with its own ruin, has made the sky starve, has made some momentary disadvantage of itself. Its circumstance deeper than tremors remains equational habit, miming itself via counted tablets of time, not a Montric blizzard of space into empty air, but every piece of ice as mathematical symbol, not as living quotient, but a day's nutrient gone awry, a dark veering, stumbling over its own loins and become at nerve's end. And because I am at nerve's end, I can only breathe mantras and live within. To breathe in mantras and live within. To try to breathe in and live within your own ambit, not as some kind of just a isolated habitat, but as a continuum that one is found for oneself, where one can begin to like serve the other nutrients of humanity. Because you were pointing out in that poem about with the poets of breathing and how they're doing in Tokyo and different parts of the universe. That's what we're talking about here. Is communicating not by conscious effort, but by vibratory effort, vibratory momentum. So that's what we want to. That's my energy and trying to convey that to the audience. That I figure for the most part, for me, is invisible. And this is called the mind as quantum quintessence. What remains as standard optical sight remains replete with non-tremor, stunted by psychological opacity that remains clinical, quantifiable, only capable of prior momentum, yet its leap becomes tremulous with undermined inertia as it starts to fulfill the helium in its clauses, being profundity within its own self-ascension, a mirage, a phantom frequency that magically shifts, glowing with its own momentum, open and alive, prone to acceleration, to subreigns, to micro tendencies, tense with weighted fertilization, yet as tendency prior to measurable synapse or pulse, proto to ungovernable bulletin or pulse, not pulsation as ineptitude. As I peer into my inner lens, I sense the tone of inevitable molecules that occur before they occur, not as relic that ignites its own hounding, so it fuses its own onerics, never as infected resonance, but incandescence that blurs, always sensing palpable meta ranges. So, you know, with an indigenous spirit, we're always interested in the other planes that are not accessible to measurement and finance and all of the palpable obstructions that we find in the modern world. And this is what artists do. Ultimately, is leap beyond all the restraints, the seeming restraints that conduct oneself into a straightened situation where the imagination is curtailed. And two of my favorite people were great. I've learned so much from a couple of great painters, Soutine and Juan Miro, because Soutine never really drew. He would just paint. He would just have people drive him around the countryside, and he would just go, oh, stop, and he'd just get out and paint real quickly. And Miro was always 1920s, 70s, at assassinate painting. So, you know, these are my, not heroes, but people that help guide my way along the way, and both as writer and artist. It says deficits, Kayem Soutine and Joanne Miro. Earlier on, negatively imprisoned by chronic familial assessment, Miro, as if anonymous crime had been proposed, a misdemeanor linked to Teutonic deficit, to bleak and conjoined unfurling, to chronicle devoid of light as efficiency, essence implanted as perpetual doubt, judged by the projected field of others. You were a dense, mystagogic trampoline, according to contorted attempt. As for Soutine, embittered within a rural world of murder, a combustion of nerves, of gestures condoned by nervous conquering statics, absorbing chronic social signals by non sequitur. You know, we put too much, things have been so much put on to us with just the cognitive mind all the time as intelligence. What about the spectral or the intuitional levels that
That's right.
our people in different parts of the globe are so conversant with, and are always, like I was talking about in that Refractive Africa book about Tutuola and Rebbe Ravello, because these elements were going through these elements were going through these languages that they've been forced into via French or via English. And Tutuola was very interesting because of the fact that he was able to merge the ancestral energies into his language, which never got a kind of recognition, obviously, when these things were being written, obviously from people like Babasola Johnson. I'll just name a person who was a big critic in West Africa, who never understood what it was to transcend the imperial status of language. So what I'm interested in is always going beyond the palpability of imperial language and taking people as imperial models, poets as imperial models, which they do in the academy all the time. So this is called inner palpability. Implied inner palpability as transpersonal dictation. All works composed as a musical arc, as if rowing in an isthmus of lightning. The threat through rising vapor currents, hissing with dissolution, this being none other than internal cartography, ghostly cipher as interiority by number. Again, ghostly flares and ciphers, as if the arc from lunar suns had risen. Therefore, suns appearing above suns, ignited via the blue fragmentation that is grace. And this other poem here is called The Alchemical Androgyne. As our species strides into blank electrical gulfs, we begin to possess a power that magically subsumes and expels rectilinear chastisement as gesture, as empirical summons, as electrification by blockage. So many times our minds have been like conducted by blockage, especially if you have what I'd say, an indigenous intelligence, but it gets trapped in certain, the flow gets trapped in certain mirages of excellence that they cut you off. You don't get a chance to really explore the mirages where the imagination can fully bloom. And for me, education has been like a really feral challenge because my mind does not work naturally doesn't work in a linear fashion. So, you get trapped in these gullies of bad marks and just crazy obfuscations along the way, but you find your way through. That's what I was so interested in Amos Tutuola and Eric Dolphy, because of the fact they got trapped in that mirage and they just began to find their own way through this jungle. And but it's hard work. There's so much doubt that prevails around you, that you're not really intelligent, you're not this, you're not that. But this is something that you really got to go through, and to get to your own language, that your own being expresses itself. And I'm gonna read the next piece. It's a small piece. It's called Pluperfect Oral Fatigue. Via pluperfect oral fatigue, there exists ophthalmological oral depth as one continues to see through speaking. Because gulfs extend, one can never be certain as to direction that hails from continuing transparency. To get through to the other side, as I said in the poem, to see through speaking, to find one's way through. It's not an easy task. It's an interior kind of exercise that one has to be able to withstand. And some of the people that you may know that had these issues, I remember Ramon Lopez Velarde from Mexico had to deal with how to find his own voice through doubt and failure and through silence. But he broke through in 1922-23, never been accorded really his magnificent achievement. but people like Octavio Paz helped a lot too, psychologically along the way, doing the long way around. But poets have to go the long way around. It's not about instant success.
That's
Not,
right.
in-
That's right.
not instant success, man. But people want to get, and forgive me at Yale, but the Yale younger poets, and then they don't do anything afterwards. They do maybe 1 or 2 books, but they don't get the whole understanding of the way poetry sometimes works. It's an extended situation, it's a protracted labor.
Yeah, it is.
It is
Yeah.
protracted labor. Bob Kaufman said it's protracted labor. It's a 24-hour a day shift. Crazy. It's a
That's
far.
right.
So they don't know what you're doing most of the time. A lot of times people just don't know. You're just wasting your time scribbling down notes. And I take a lot of notes to myself. Wow. And I don't mean it in an academic manner, but I'll hear lines and I put them down. I just put them down as I move along. And they just come to you at odd times. They're like odd signals from outer space, man. They come to you and you put them down, because it's one thing about poetry. If you don't put it down, it disappears sometimes.
Yeah.
It really does. It's magical language. Michelle Liddy's talked about the magical language. It's a far out situation. And I don't know what we're doing with time here, but I'll try this other one. And maybe we can talk a little bit. It's called Human Presence That Lingers as Distorted Molecule. Present human scale, weighted as microcarbon, as suffix, as dazzling suffocation of itself. Alive as Seifel's mystery, as collapsed tourniquet that expands rancor in its mind, that tends to scavenge its own mystery, arrayed in sub-riddles dressing gowns, being procreated glamour as self-spawned debility. This being cradled as disabled identity, as a wilderness of mirrors, its mind slowly spinning in tandem with a Ferris wheel of races, pain, self-chronicled inside its own self-suspended dice of Euro-Occidental dilemmas. That self instills corrupted linearity that retains as its power slivers of torment that remains unto itself dazed, dazzled fractionation. Thus, garish fascination constantly lingers from inner stirring at birth to the grave, beholden to stimulation, to captured fatigue, tending to procreate distraction as neo-renewal, being claustrophobia as insight, stunted within splendiferous reduction. Psychic maturity akin to owls that protractedly moan, rendering the same enunciated vowel sound as strategy through language. Therefore, its central expression diluted, its lingual astronomy goaded by reduction, its nerve ends diluted by barrenness, by repetitious study of itself, condoned to brazen stating, to foreshortened impairment of itself, thus a phantom electric nerve yield, a lessened procreational nerve yield, corrupted by tense statistical phantom grammar that potentially yields a solar force 25 trillion miles from our momentary continents, being micro yield of our disfigured journey, thus a matrix of lepers scorned by self-revulsion of themselves.
Yes.
Now, these are poems that I don't expect people just to jump into and, oh, I got that. It's rhythmic yield, but it takes some time to do these things and to energize oneself into this matrix of energy that one is trying to conduct and to connect with into the general world. So I don't expect people to, I certainly don't get into poetry via memorization at all, but because of the complexity of the work and the way it works, I tend to read them and work with them I work with things all the time. So, poetry to me is a continuous activity. One is in the river of poetry, so one is always swimming, always clutching on the branches, coming up on land and going back out to sea. It's a crazy experience that you cannot explain to others, but it comes out through the language. So that's why I think that books and written work is very important, to put these impulses down so that they can be transmitted across the world.
I think you just said a very important word, and you said this word earlier about transmission, and you just said transmitted, and it's beautiful and incredible that you have found those various pathways and links to make that kind of transmission from, as you mentioned, from where we are right now, whatever point that is, or what we are right now, whatever that point is, all the way, as you said earlier, through space and through these extensions, these incredible extensions through time and space, which you have presented in this book that you just published, which is a beautiful book, City Lights and Divine Blue Light. You have found that divine blue light through language, and I think in this book, you give us kind of a set of stairways. There's a set of stairways, or a set of stones that we can step on and follow, or simply just a phrase, just one phrase that we can decipher. Like what is it, lingual ravines? You use that phrase a number of times. You use multidimensionality a number of times, and the word quantum. I think that's one of the key words, right? I think that's what in some ways you're doing. And of course you use the word magic too, and indigenous. When and I think quantum is a very key concept for your work, because of the concept that you also mentioned, which is entanglement, right? We create an action here, or you simply are this kind of spiraling. We're spiraling bodies of atomic particles, and whatever move and gesture those particles or that quantum whole that we are, it entangles light years from the point where we stand.
Exactly.
Right. And how you were, and that does the same thing we're doing. For example, right now you're reading a poem, you're talking about poetry, and if we look at it in a quantum lens, that same this same reading is bouncing somewhere in one of those nebulas.
It's true. That's true. We're trying to communicate. People want to just physically go up to outer space, but you can just do this lingually as well.
You can do it right.
Instantaneous.
And in this book, you give us kind of like a manifesto and many other things, of course, and a map and many other things. And these phrases, many phrases. Every poem has a lot of material that we can use, or we can just simply dip into, or absorb, or extend to, that we can bounce with, and kind of have a, what is that thing called? The periodical table of elements.
Sure,
Well,
yeah.
in your book, you're kind of presenting a table of entanglement, where we can just literally just stretch ourselves out through space and through time. If that's after we begin to kind of open up this whole thing about poetics or poetry, like you said, I remember in 1970, everybody was talking about identity. Remember 1970? Everything was identity. Everything was, let's go back to Mexico. Let's go back to Indian country. Let's go back to Africa. Let's go find our ancestral insights and origins. We were all doing that in some manner or another. And I thought, I want to go back to three places in Mexico. The Totonac area and the Veracruz side of Mexico, Atlantic, where Cortés first came. I want to see what happened to those Totonac peoples. I want to see what they're thinking and what they're writing, or what they're expressing about themselves. And I want to go, I said to myself, I want to go to Mayan country in Chiapas. I want to go all the way out to those jungles, those where people got pushed out and kind of slammed into and not let out. Of course, they got massacred as well. And I want to know what they're doing, the Lacandon people. And then lastly, I want to go to the Huichol peoples. This is back in 1970. And they're up in the mountains where the Spanish, probably at best, attempted to colonize that group in the 1700s, way after they had done quite a bit already. And they weren't able to accomplish much, the Spaniards. So I said, I want to go to that place too, since they have most of their culture still cooking, and their songs and their weavings and their music and their thought and thinking. And so when I went there, I got too sucked into the exploitation they were suffering from the landowners. There were still landowners, and I got caught up in, of course, we all would, into how they were being seen, treated by the national Mexican population or sector. Of course, we know how that was, being put down and being seen as Indians, quote unquote.
Sure.
And not really being appreciated given who they really were. So I got more into that all of a sudden, and I forgot about the fact that I was after the poetics. And I thought, and it was right in front of me.
Yeah,
The thing is,
you're
it was
right.
right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I just literally, like mid last year, I said, oh, I think I got it. There was the first harvesting of the first corn, the harvesting of the first corn up in the sierras in central Mexico, Nayarit. And the shaman, like yourself, the shaman came out, Ramon Medina Silva, and he cured a man who was sick, and he used hawk feathers, and he used a wand that he had carved out of a stick with hawk feathers, and he brushed the body from the 4 points of the body and centered it in his navel, more or less. He was sweeping the body to the center. And then he had like a cane flute, and he sucked out the crystals that he felt were in his heart, that were kind of injuring his soul. And then he spit them into his hand, right? So he could find out, so he could diagnose what was going on with this young man who was sick. So that's like a couple of scenes right there. And then there was another scene where people were praying and chanting in a small thatched roof house with the corn already laid up against the wall. Our mother, young dove girl, the corn, that they Huerica Wimari, there she was, this beautiful corn. Everybody was chanting and chanting, and there were little offerings of tortillas and food, and everybody was on the ground. Okay, I said that was another scene. And at night, everybody stayed up. The elders stayed up, and they sang songs, and they played the drum, and the fire was speaking to them. And the women were dancing in a circle under the moon. All this was in this, like 10 feet away from the fire. Sure. And there was the hummingbirds that were humming messages to Ramon. And there was the blue jay, which was his spiritual advisor. And all that, he told me about all that, and I saw it in action, but I thought poetics was poetics, right? Poetics, he's going to read a poem, I want to read a poem, everybody, a Huichol poem. And I had the wrong idea. That wasn't it.
It's a total medicine we're talking about. The language is a total medicine.
There it is. Thank you, sir. There it is. It was everything. It was like a multi-directional everything, from the hummingbird to the prayers to the beautiful corn to the flower leaves being given to the earth as he walked up the mountain, and to the healing, to the hawk feathers. That was the poem.
That's what we don't get in the Western Academy, because of the fact that, you know, what I did was I was able to go to the Kachina dances. And I don't know how I got down there, but one of the dancers gave me a blessed wand, and I saved it. I began to brush myself with it, invigorate myself with it for as long as it would stay around. And that's what we're talking about, this kind of connection that seems to be invisible, that's no longer procreated by the Academy, because I've been doing some work on all of this in terms of the demarcation of the so-called West, which was interesting because I was thinking about, I did this book, I think it's coming out this year, this year, I shouldn't say next year, but this year, it's called Dar el Hikmah. It's about one of the great institutions of learning in the in the Muslim world. And it was founded by this Caliph al-Hakim in Cairo in 1004. But out of that, all of the Western institutions began in Oxford and Salamanca, and all of these Bologna began to seed out of the Muslim and the Jewish experience, but which was denied in about the 1400s, or when they started burning witches. and all at the same time, and Indians were attacked and Africans were attacked. Everybody was under attack, and we're still reeling from that right now. So this is why this language is great to get into the vibratory essences of the language. Now,
that's the thing.
That's the thing, is not just people want to talk about the intellectual activity, the intellectual superstructure, but the whole idea of the vibratory rate. How does language vibrate in that particular word that one is using? Maybe you don't understand it cognitively, but it's getting into the medicine, it's getting in.
I hate to break up the party, y'all. The medicine is getting in, but I think it is time to call it a night. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to your questions, but I just want to encourage folks to buy Divine Blue Light by Will Alexander from Greenlight Bookstore. Thank you so much, Will, for reading for us tonight. Juan, for joining us in conversation. The two of you, I was like, gosh, you know, I could just sit back and listen to them go. I know you have a lot of fans who attended tonight, many of whom said they tuned in from all over, and we're so grateful for this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Will.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We'll stay in touch. We'll like to talk some more.
We'll do that. Okay.
We'll do it.
Bye, y'all. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.